The November rain fell steadily on Nashville's streets, turning the sidewalks into mirrors that reflected the neon glow of Broadway's honky-tonks. Sarah Michelle Thompson pulled her worn denim jacket tighter around her shoulders, seeking shelter under the narrow overhang behind the Ryman Auditorium. The mother church of country music towered above her like a monument to dreams she once held dear. At 34, Sarah's face still held traces of the woman she used to be, a high school music teacher with bright eyes and endless optimism. But 3 years of homelessness had carved new lines around those eyes, and her once golden hair now hung in limp strands beneath a faded baseball cap. Her fingers, calloused from gripping cardboard signs and sleeping on concrete, wrapped around the neck of her battered acoustic guitar, the only possession she'd managed to keep through everything. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Sarah's voice drifted through the empty alley, rich and haunting despite the circumstances. That saved a wretch like me. The song had become her prayer, her lifeline, her way of making sense of how quickly life could change. 3 years ago, she'd been Mrs. Thompson, teaching kids about music theory and the magic of harmony. She'd had a mortgage, a car payment, and a husband named David who made her laugh every single day. Then came the diagnosis, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and the medical bills that insurance wouldn't cover. David fought for 18 months. Sarah fought beside him, selling everything they owned to pay for experimental treatments and specialists. When he died on a Tuesday morning in February, he left behind more than grief. He left behind $180,000 in medical debt that swallowed their house, their savings, and Sarah's ability to function in the world she'd known. The teaching job was the first thing to go. How could she stand in front of teenagers and talk about following your dreams when her own had crumbled so completely? The apartment came next, then the car, then the gradual slide from staying with friends to sleeping in her Honda Civic to finally, inevitably, the streets. I once was lost, but now am found. That's beautiful. Sarah's voice caught in her throat. She looked up to see a small woman in a rhinestone-studded jacket and perfectly styled blonde hair standing at the mouth of the alley. Even in the dim light, there was no mistaking that face. Those kind eyes that had been smiling from album covers and movie screens for decades. "Miss Parton?" Sarah's voice came out as barely a whisper. Dolly Parton stepped closer, her heels clicking softly on the wet pavement. "I heard you singing from inside the studio. That's one of my favorite hymns, and honey, you sing it like you've lived every word." Sarah struggled to her feet, clutching her guitar. "I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone could hear. I'll move along." "Oh, don't you dare." Dolly held up a perfectly manicured hand. "I came out here because I had to know who had that voice. What's your name, sweetheart?" Sarah Thompson." "Well, Sarah Thompson, I'm Dolly Parton, but I guess you figured that out." "Ah." Dolly's famous smile was even warmer in person. "You mind if I ask what brings you to be singing behind the Ryman on a night like this?" Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "How do you explain to someone who's lived the American dream that you've been living the American nightmare?" I don't really have anywhere else to go." Dolly's expression softened, and Sarah saw something she hadn't expected. Not pity, but recognition. "Honey, I grew up in a one-room cabin in the Smoky Mountains with 11 brothers and sisters. My daddy was a sharecropper, and there were plenty of nights we went to bed hungry. I know what it's like to have nowhere to go." The rain picked up, drumming harder against the overhang above them. Dolly looked up at the sky, then back at Sarah. "Tell you what, there's a little diner about 2 blocks from here called Martha's Kitchen. They make a mean cup of coffee and the best apple pie in Nashville. What do you say we get out of this rain and you tell me your story?" Sarah shook her head quickly. "I couldn't. I mean, thank you, but I don't want charity." "Charity?" Dolly laughed, the sound musical even in conversation. "Honey, this is purely selfish on my part. I've been in that studio for 6 hours trying to get a song right, and my brain feels like mush. Sometimes the best thing a songwriter can do is listen to someone else's story, consider it research." Sarah hesitated. When was the last time someone had asked to hear her story? When was the last time someone had looked at her like she was a person worth knowing rather than a problem to be avoided? Plus, Dolly added with a conspiratorial wink, Martha makes her apple pie with real butter and Tennessee honey. Life's too short to turn down pie like that. Despite everything, Sarah found herself smiling, actually smiling, for the first time in months. Well, when you put it like that. 20 minutes later, they sat in a corner booth at Martha's kitchen, the warmth of the diner thawing Sarah's chilled bones. The owner, a robust woman in her 60s named Martha Davis, had nearly fainted when Dolly walked through the door, but quickly recovered enough to pour coffee and cut enormous slices of pie. "Now then," Dolly said, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug, "tell me about Sarah Thompson." And so Sarah did. She told Dolly about growing up in Cincinnati, about discovering her love for music in high school choir, about the scholarship to Belmont University that brought her to Nashville in the first place. She talked about meeting David at a coffee shop near campus, about their wedding in her parents' backyard, about the joy of teaching kids who had never thought they could sing. "I had this one student," Sarah said, her eyes brightening with the memory, "Marcus Williams. Kid from the projects, tough as nails, but he had this incredible voice. He was convinced that singing was soft, but I kept working with him, and finally at our spring concert he sang Stand By Me solo, brought down the house." "What happened to Marcus?" Dolly asked. "Got a full scholarship to Vanderbilt. He's pre-med now." Sarah's smile faltered. "He sent me a Christmas card last year. To my old address, of course, but a neighbor forwarded it. He said I changed his life." "Sounds to me like you changed a lot of lives." "Maybe, but I couldn't change the one that mattered most." Sarah's voice grew quiet as she told Dolly about David's illness, about the mounting bills, about the crushing weight of watching someone you love slip away while the world demands payment for every day you try to keep them. "After David died, I couldn't. I couldn't stand in front of those kids and tell them to chase their dreams when mine had turned into a nightmare. I couldn't pretend that hard work and talent were enough when I'd lost everything despite doing everything right." Dolly reached across the table and covered Sarah's hand with her own. "Oh, honey, you didn't lose everything. You're still here. That voice is still here. And from what I can tell, that heart that made you a good teacher is still beating strong. But I'm homeless, Ms. Parton. I sleep in alleys and beg for change. How is that not losing everything? Because losing everything would mean giving up, and you haven't done that. You're still singing, aren't you? Still making music even when it's just for the rain and the empty streets. That tells me you haven't lost the most important thing of all." Sarah felt tears threatening. "What's that?" "Hope, sweetheart. It might be buried deep, but it's still there. Otherwise, you wouldn't be singing hymns in the alley behind the Ryman. You'd be doing something else entirely." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the sounds of the diner, clinking dishes, quiet conversations, the hiss of the coffee machine, wrapping around them like a warm blanket. Finally, Dolly spoke again. "Sarah, I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer. If you could have anything at all, what would it be?" Sarah looked down at her hands, thinking. The easy answers came first. A home, stability, enough money to stop worrying about where she'd sleep or what she'd eat. But as she sat there in the warmth of Martha's kitchen, across from a woman who'd somehow managed to make her feel human again, a different answer emerged. "I'd want to matter again," she said finally. "I'd want to use my voice, really use it, to make someone else's life a little bit better. The way music used to do for me, the way it did for Marcus and all those other kids. I'd want to remember what it feels like to be part of something bigger than just surviving." Dolly nodded slowly. "That's a beautiful answer, Sarah Thompson, and I have a feeling you're going to get that chance sooner than you think." Outside, the rain had stopped, and the lights of Nashville's music district painted the wet streets in gold and red. Inside Martha's kitchen, two women, one a global superstar, one a forgotten dreamer, sat over coffee and pie, and something magical began to take shape between them. It was the kind of moment that changes everything, though neither of them knew it yet. "Sarah," Dolly said as they prepared to leave, "I'm recording tomorrow afternoon. Nothing fancy, just some vocals for a new album. Would you like to come by the studio? I could use someone with ears like yours to help me get it right." Sarah's eyes widened. "You can't be serious." "Honey, I'm 77 years old. I don't have time left to say things I don't mean." Dolly pulled out a business card and wrote an address on the back. "Music Row, 2 o'clock. Ask for Tommy Richardson. He's my engineer. Tell him Dolly said to bring you back to Studio A." As they stepped out into the Nashville night, the city seemed different to Sarah, more alive, more full of possibility. For the first time in 3 years, tomorrow held something other than the simple challenge of survival. Tomorrow held hope. "Ms. Parton," Sarah called as Dolly headed toward a waiting car. "Why are you doing this?" Dolly paused, her hand on the car door. "Because 30 years ago, I was a scared girl from the mountains with nothing but a guitar and a dream. And because somewhere along the way, I learned that the best way to keep your dreams alive is to help someone else's dreams come true." The car door closed, and Sarah watched the taillights disappear into the Nashville traffic. She looked down at the business card in her hand, then up at the stars that were just beginning to peek through the clearing clouds. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Sarah Michelle Thompson went to sleep, believing in tomorrow. Sarah woke before dawn, on the concrete step of the old Baptist church on 4th Avenue, her body stiff from the cold. But instead of the usual despair that greeted her mornings, she felt something she'd almost forgotten: anticipation. The business card was still in her jacket pocket, real and solid proof that yesterday hadn't been a dream. She made her way to the YMCA on Broadway, where a day pass cost $5, money she'd earned the night before singing outside the bars. The hot shower felt like luxury itself, and as she stood under the streaming water, Sarah tried to process what was happening. Dolly Parton wanted her to come to a recording session. It seemed impossible, like something that would happen to someone else, someone whose life hadn't fallen apart so completely. After her shower, Sarah stood in front of the cracked mirror in the YMCA locker room, trying to make herself presentable. Her jeans were clean but worn, her sweater had a small hole near the left elbow, and her shoes had seen better years. But her hair was clean, and when she looked closely, she could still see traces of the woman she used to be. "It's not about how you look," she whispered to her reflection, repeating words she used to tell her nervous students before concerts. "It's about what you bring to the music." At 1:45 p.m., Sarah stood outside a nondescript building on Music Row, her guitar slung across her back. The address on Dolly's business card led to what looked like just another office building, but she knew that behind these walls, magic happened daily. Nashville was full of places like this, unremarkable from the outside, legendary within. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup and a genuine smile, looked up as Sarah entered. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Tommy Richardson." Dolly Parton said to ask for him. The receptionist's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're Sarah. Ms. Parton said you might be coming by. Let me call Tommy for you." Within minutes, a tall man in his 40s with graying temples and kind eyes appeared. "Sarah Thompson. I'm Tommy Richardson. Dolly told me all about you. She's been looking forward to this all morning." Tommy led her through a maze of hallways lined with gold records and photographs of Nashville legends. "Fair warning," he said as they walked. "When Dolly gets excited about someone's voice, she tends to go a little overboard. Don't let her overwhelm you." "Is she really in there?" Sarah asked, suddenly nervous. "Oh, she's in there all right, along with Jake Sullivan, her guitarist, and Emma Rodriguez, who plays fiddle. They've been working on this song for weeks, and Dolly thinks fresh ears might help them crack it." Tommy opened the door to Studio A, and Sarah stepped into a world she'd only imagined. The room was filled with instruments, guitars, keyboards, a full drum kit, microphones positioned at precise angles. And there, behind the glass of the vocal booth, stood Dolly Parton, headphones around her neck, talking animatedly with two other musicians. "Sarah," Dolly's face lit up when she saw her. "I was starting to worry you wouldn't come. Tommy, bring her on in here." The introductions were warm and welcoming. Jake Sullivan, a weathered man with calloused hands and laugh lines around his eyes, shook Sarah's hand firmly. "Dolly says you've got quite a voice. Always trust Dolly's judgment about voices." Emma Rodriguez, a woman about Sarah's age, with vibrant streaks of purple in her black hair, grinned widely. "She also says you know how to really listen to music. That's rarer than you might think." "Now," Dolly said, settling onto a stool with her guitar, "we've been wrestling with this song for weeks. It's called Where the River Bends, and it's about finding your way home when home isn't a place anymore. I wrote it thinking about all the folks who've had to leave their mountains for work, but it's not quite landing right. Sarah, would you mind just listening and telling us what you hear?" What followed was 15 minutes of pure magic. Dolly's voice, even in the casual setting of the studio, was everything Sarah remembered from childhood records: crystalline, emotional, authentic. Jake's guitar work was subtle but perfect, providing just the right foundation. Emma's fiddle added layers of longing that made Sarah's chest tight, but Dolly was right. Something wasn't quite clicking. "It's beautiful," Sarah said when they finished. "But can I ask about the bridge? The melody climbs really high on I'm still searching for the bend in the river, and it feels like it should stay there emotionally. But then it drops back down for that leads me back to you. What if it stayed high? What if the river bend isn't down in the valley, but up in the mountains?" The room went quiet. Jake and Emma exchanged glances. Dolly tilted her head, considering. "Sing it," Dolly said. "Sing how you hear it." Sarah felt a moment of panic. She was about to sing in front of Dolly Parton and professional Nashville musicians. But then she looked at Dolly's encouraging face and remembered why she was here. Not to impress, but to help make something beautiful. Sarah closed her eyes and sang the bridge the way she heard it in her head, her voice soaring on the high notes, staying strong and clear as the melody painted a picture of someone climbing toward hope rather than sinking into despair. When she opened her eyes, the room was completely silent. "Well, I'll be damned," Jake said softly. "That's it. That's what we were missing." "Oh, honey," Dolly breathed. "That gave me chills. Tommy, did you get that?" Tommy's voice came through the speakers from the control room. "Got every note. Want me to play it back?" For the next hour, they worked on the song together. Sarah found herself not just listening but contributing, suggesting a slight change in Jake's guitar part, harmonizing with Dolly on the chorus, helping Emma find a fiddle line that complemented rather than competed with the vocal melody. It was like being in her old music classroom again, but instead of teaching teenagers, she was collaborating with some of the most talented musicians in Nashville. And they were listening to her, really listening, as if her ideas mattered, as if she belonged there. "All right," Dolly said finally, "I think we've got ourselves a song." "Sarah, that was exactly what we needed. You've got an incredible ear, and that voice of yours, Lord have mercy." "It felt good," Sarah admitted. "I'd forgotten what it felt like to make music with other people." "Well, you're going to remember real quick," Dolly said, with a mischievous glint in her eye. "Because I want you to sing it with me." Sarah's mouth fell open. "What?" "You heard me. This song needs your voice on it. Not backing vocals. I want you to share lead vocals with me. That high harmony in the bridge, the way you made it soar, that's not something I can do alone anymore. My voice isn't what it was when I was your age. But I can't. I'm nobody. I'm homeless. I can't record with you." Dolly stood up and walked over to Sarah, placing her hands on the younger woman's shoulders. "Honey, let me tell you something about being nobody. I was nobody once, too. We all were. Nobody becomes somebody when they stop believing they're nobody and start believing in the gift God gave them. But what if I'm not good enough? You are. I wouldn't have asked if you weren't. And more than that, this song needs your story. It needs the voice of someone who really has been searching for the bend in the river that leads them home. My fans trust me to bring them authentic music, and your voice on this song, that's as authentic as it gets." Jake nodded emphatically. "She's right, Sarah. You've lived this song. When you sing it, people will feel it." "Besides," Emma added with a grin, "arguing with Dolly Parton about music is like arguing with the ocean about being wet. You're gonna lose." Sarah looked around the room at these three people who, just hours ago, had been strangers. Now they felt like family, like the musical family she'd lost when her world crumbled. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, yes, I'll sing with you." "That's my girl!" Dolly clapped her hands together. "Tommy, set up another microphone. We're going to lay down the best duet Nashville has heard in years." What happened next was pure magic. Sarah stepped into the vocal booth beside Dolly, headphones on, looking through the glass at Jake and Emma, who gave her encouraging thumbs up. The familiar red recording light came on, and suddenly Sarah was singing a duet with Dolly Parton. Her voice blended perfectly with Dolly's, adding a raw, emotional depth that made the song come alive. Where Dolly's voice was polished and professional, Sarah's carried the weight of real experience. Together, they created something neither could have achieved alone. "I'm still searching for the bend in the river that leads me back to you." When they finished, the studio was completely silent. Then Tommy's voice came through the speakers. "That was a one-take wonder, ladies. We got it." Jake wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "In 30 years of playing music, that might be the most beautiful thing I've ever been part of." Emma nodded, her own eyes misty. "People are going to lose their minds when they hear this." Dolly hugged Sarah tightly. "You just recorded your first Nashville track, sweetheart. How does it feel?" Sarah could barely speak through her tears. "Like coming home." "Good," Dolly said, "because this is just the beginning. Tommy, make sure Sarah gets a copy of that recording, and make sure she gets a session musician payment too. Miss Parton, you don't have to—" "Dolly, call me Dolly. And yes, I do have to. You just contributed to what's going to be one of the most important songs on my next album. Artists get paid for their work, no matter what their living situation." As the session wound down, Dolly pulled Sarah aside. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to think about it carefully. Would you be interested in doing more sessions? I know some other artists who could use someone with your ear and your voice." "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. Word travels fast in Nashville, and when people hear this recording, they're going to want to know who the other voice is. If you're interested, I can make some calls." Sarah felt like she was dreaming. That morning she'd woken up on a church step with nothing but her guitar and the clothes on her back. Now she was standing in a professional recording studio, having just recorded a song with one of country music's biggest legends, being offered more work. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I'm very interested." "Good girl. Now I know you're between living situations right now. I have a friend, Margaret Chen, who runs a boarding house for musicians about 10 minutes from Music Row. Clean rooms, reasonable rates, and she's good people. Would you like me to make a call?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears again. "Why are you doing all this for me?" Dolly smiled that warm, famous smile. "Because sometimes the universe puts people in your path for a reason. Yesterday, I was feeling sorry for myself, thinking maybe my best days were behind me. Then I heard you singing in that alley, and I remembered why I fell in love with music in the first place. You reminded me that it's not about the glitter and the spotlights. It's about the truth in the voice and the story in the song." She handed Sarah another business card. "That's my personal number. Use it if you need anything, and I mean anything. And Sarah, don't let anyone tell you you're not good enough. You've got something special, and Nashville needs to hear it." As Sarah walked out of the studio that evening, she felt like a different person than the one who'd walked in. In her pocket was a check for $200, her first music income in 3 years, and the address of Margaret Chen's boarding house. But more than that, she had something she'd thought was gone forever: hope. The streets of Nashville looked different now. Instead of seeing closed doors and impossible dreams, Sarah saw possibility. She saw the city that had once welcomed a poor girl from the Smoky Mountains and turned her into Dolly Parton. The city that might, just maybe, have room for one more dreamer trying to find her way home. That night, Sarah Michelle Thompson slept in a real bed for the first time in 3 years. And when she woke up, she was ready to sing. Margaret Chen's boarding house on 16th Avenue South was a 3-story Victorian that had been converted into individual rooms for Nashville's struggling artists. Margaret, a petite woman in her 50s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, welcomed Sarah with a warmth that reminded her immediately of Dolly. "Any friend of Dolly's is family here," Margaret said, showing Sarah to a small but clean room on the second floor. "Rent's $60 a week, includes breakfast and dinner. There's a practice room in the basement if you need somewhere to work on your music." The room was simple: a single bed, a small dresser, a window that looked out onto the tree-lined street. But it was hers, at least for now, and after 3 years of sleeping wherever she could find shelter, it felt like a palace. "Margaret," Sarah said as the older woman prepared to leave, "I don't know how to thank you for this. Honey, I've been running this place for 15 years. I've seen hundreds of dreamers come through that front door. Some make it, some don't, but they all deserve a safe place to chase their dreams. You just focus on your music and let me worry about the rest." That first week in the boarding house was a revelation. Sarah met other musicians, songwriters working their second jobs, singers performing in dive bars, instrumentalists trying to break into session work. They shared meals in Margaret's kitchen, swapped stories about near misses and small victories, and slowly Sarah began to remember what it felt like to be part of a community again. Her room became her sanctuary. She wrote songs on an old notebook Margaret had given her, working out melodies on her guitar late into the night. The songs came from deep places, about loss and hope, about falling down and getting back up, about the difference between being broken and being destroyed. 3 days after moving in, Dolly called with her first session referral. "Sarah, honey, I've got a singer named Rebecca Matthews who's working on her debut album. She's got a beautiful voice, but she's struggling with some of the harmonies. Would you be interested in helping her out?" Rebecca Matthews turned out to be a 23-year-old from small-town Georgia with a powerhouse voice and a deer-in-the-headlights expression. Her producer, a gruff man named Bill Peterson, had been getting frustrated with her inability to nail the complex harmonies on her lead single. "She can sing," Bill told Sarah before the session, "but she can't hear harmonies worth a damn. Dolly says you've got an ear for this stuff." Sarah worked with Rebecca for 3 hours, breaking down the harmony parts, teaching her to hear how her voice could weave around the melody line instead of fighting with it. By the end of the session, Rebecca was nailing harmonies that had been eluding her for weeks. "How did you do that?" Rebecca asked afterward. "My vocal coach couldn't get me to understand what Bill was asking for, but you made it make sense." "Everyone hears music differently," Sarah explained. "Sometimes you just need someone who speaks your musical language to translate." Word spread quickly. Within 2 weeks, Sarah was getting called for 3 or 4 sessions a week, sometimes as a harmony singer, sometimes as a vocal coach, sometimes just as an extra set of ears to help work out arrangement problems. The pay wasn't huge, but it was steady. And for the first time in 3 years, Sarah was building something. More importantly, she was building relationships. Nashville's music community was smaller than people realized, and talent, real talent, was always in demand. Sarah's reputation as someone who could solve vocal problems spread through the network of producers, engineers, and artists who made Music Row function. "You've got a gift," said Crystal Hayes, a veteran songwriter who hired Sarah to help with background vocals on a project for a major label artist. "Not just the voice, though that's stunning. You understand how voices work together. That's not something you can teach. You either hear it or you don't." But it was the call from Dolly that changed everything. "Sarah, honey, I need you to come to the studio tomorrow. We're shooting a video for Where the River Bends, and I want you to be in it." "A music video?" "Dolly, I can't be in a music video. I'm not ready for that." "Sweetheart, that song belongs to both of us now. My fans need to see who that other voice is. Besides, the video concept is perfect. It's about people finding their way home. Your story is part of that story now." The video shoot was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. A team of professionals transformed a Nashville soundstage into what looked like a rustic barn, complete with string lights and vintage microphones. Sarah watched in amazement as makeup artists and stylists worked their magic not just on Dolly, but on her as well. "We're not changing who you are," explained Lisa Wong, the stylist assigned to Sarah. "We're just helping you feel confident in front of the camera. The goal is to make you look like the best version of yourself." When Sarah looked in the mirror after Lisa finished with her, she barely recognized herself. Her hair was styled in loose waves that caught the light, and Lisa had chosen clothes that were simple but elegant, jeans and a flowing white blouse that photographed beautifully under the studio lights. "You look stunning," Dolly said when she saw Sarah, "but more importantly, you look like yourself." That's what the camera needs to see, the real Sarah Thompson. The video director, an energetic man named Marcus Johnson, gathered everyone for a brief meeting before filming began. "The concept is simple," he explained. "We're telling the story of the song, people searching for home, for connection, for their place in the world. Dolly and Sarah, you two are the heart of this story. I want to see the connection between you, the way your voices complement each other." What followed were 8 hours of filming, multiple takes of Sarah and Dolly performing the song, close-ups of their hands on their guitars, wide shots of the two women sharing the microphone. But the magic happened during the quieter moments, when the cameras captured the genuine affection and musical chemistry between them. "This is special," Marcus told his crew during a break. "You can't fake the kind of connection these two have. The camera loves authenticity, and this is as authentic as it gets." During lunch, Sarah and Dolly sat together in Dolly's trailer, sharing sandwiches and talking about how much had changed in just a few weeks. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up, and this will all have been a dream," Sarah admitted. "3 weeks ago, I was sleeping in alleys. Now I'm shooting a music video with you. Honey, this isn't a dream. It's what happens when talent meets opportunity and you're brave enough to say yes. You could have walked away that night at Martha's kitchen. You could have decided you weren't worth the risk. But you didn't, and look what happened. I'm scared, though. What if people don't like me? What if they think I don't belong here?" Dolly set down her sandwich and looked directly at Sarah. "Let me tell you something about belonging, sweetheart. I've spent 50 years in this business, and I've learned that the only person who gets to decide if you belong somewhere is you. Your voice belongs on that song, your story belongs in that video, and you belong in Nashville's music community. But what if? No what ifs. What ifs will kill your dreams faster than any critic ever could. The only question that matters is, do you want this? Do you want to be a musician again?" Sarah thought about the past few weeks, the joy of being back in recording studios, the satisfaction of helping other artists find their voices, the feeling of coming alive again when she sang. Yes, I want this more than anything. Then that's all that matters. The rest is just noise. The video was released 3 weeks later, accompanying the radio premiere of Where the River Bends. Sarah watched it for the first time in Margaret's living room, surrounded by her fellow boarders who had become like family. The video was beautiful, intimate but not small, professional but not slick. The chemistry between Sarah and Dolly was undeniable, their voices blending perfectly on the screen just as they had in the studio. But what struck Sarah most was seeing herself as others would see her, not as a homeless woman who'd lost everything, but as a musician, an artist, someone with something valuable to contribute. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The video garnered 500,000 views in its first day online. Radio stations across the country added the song to their playlists, and Sarah's phone, the new one Dolly had insisted she get, started ringing constantly. Sarah Thompson, this is Janet Rodriguez from Country Music Television. We'd love to have you and Dolly on our morning show next week. Miss Thompson, this is David Park from Rolling Stone. We're doing a feature on unexpected collaborations, and we'd love to include your story. Sarah, it's Michael Scott from Grand Ole Opry. Dolly mentioned you might be interested in performing with her at our Saturday night show. Each opportunity felt surreal, but Sarah had learned to say yes. Yes to the interviews, yes to the photo shoots, yes to the performance opportunities that began flooding in. Most importantly, she said yes to believing in herself again. The Grand Ole Opry performance was scheduled for a Saturday night in early December. Sarah had grown up listening to the Opry on the radio with her grandmother, never imagining she might someday stand on that famous stage herself. The afternoon of the show, she stood in the wings watching the other performers, still hardly believing she was there. The Opry felt sacred. Generations of country music legends had walked these same floors, stood in these same wings, felt the same nervous excitement she was feeling now. You ready for this, sweetheart? Dolly appeared beside her, resplendent in a silver and turquoise outfit that sparkled under the stage lights. I think so. Are you sure they're ready for me? Honey, the Opry audience is the most welcoming in the world. They don't care where you came from. They care about what you bring to the music. And what you bring is something special. The host's voice rang out over the packed auditorium. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Grand Ole Opry stage, Miss Dolly Parton and Sarah Michelle Thompson. Walking onto that stage felt like stepping into a dream. The audience, nearly 3,000 people, erupted in applause. The lights were blinding, but Sarah could feel the energy of the crowd, the weight of history in the building, the magnitude of the moment. "Thank you, Nashville," Dolly called out to the crowd. "Y'all, I want to tell you about my friend Sarah here. A few months ago, I found her singing in an alley behind the Ryman, and her voice just knocked me flat. We recorded a song together, and now I want to share it with the most important audience in country music. Y'all." As the opening notes of Where the River Bends began, Sarah felt a calm settle over her. This was what she was meant to do. This was where she belonged. When she opened her mouth to sing her first verse, her voice filled the auditorium with a clarity and power that surprised even her. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every note. When Sarah and Dolly reached the soaring bridge, the part that had been Sarah's idea, the emotion in the room was palpable. By the time they finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. Sarah stood there, holding Dolly's hand, tears streaming down her face as she looked out at an audience on their feet, applauding not just the song, but her journey, her comeback, her refusal to give up. "Nashville," Dolly said into her microphone when the applause finally died down. "I think we just witnessed the birth of a star." The months following the Opry performance passed in a whirlwind of activity that Sarah could barely process. Where the River Bends climbed the country charts, eventually reaching number 3, Dolly's highest charting song in over a decade. More importantly, it sparked a conversation across the country about homelessness, about second chances, and about the power of music to transform lives. Sarah found herself at the center of that conversation, and while the attention was sometimes overwhelming, she embraced her role as an advocate for people experiencing homelessness. She began partnering with Nashville's homeless services organizations, using her platform to raise awareness and funds for programs that helped people get back on their feet. "I never want anyone to think I'm the exception," Sarah told a reporter from the Nashville scene. "There are talented, capable people living on the streets every day. I was just lucky enough to meet someone who saw my potential instead of my circumstances." The success of the duet led to offers Sarah had never imagined. Record labels wanted to sign her. Agents wanted to represent her. Venues across the country wanted to book her for concerts, but perhaps the most meaningful opportunity came from an unexpected source. "Sarah, it's William Henderson from Belmont University's music program," the voice on her phone said. "We'd love to have you come speak to our students about your journey. And, well, if you're interested, we have an opening for an adjunct professor in our vocal performance program. In Belmont University, her alma mater, where she'd first fallen in love with Nashville, where she'd met David, where her dreams had first taken shape. Coming full circle to teach, there felt like destiny." Sarah's first day back at Belmont was emotional. Walking across the campus, where she'd been a student 15 years earlier, she was struck by how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. The buildings looked newer, the technology was more advanced, but the energy was the same. Young dreamers from across the country coming to Nashville to chase their musical ambitions. Her class, Vocal Performance and the Music Business, drew 25 students, an eclectic mix of singer-songwriters, aspiring pop stars, and country hopefuls. Sarah looked out at their eager faces and saw herself at their age, full of hope and certainty that talent and hard work were all you needed to succeed. "Before we talk about vocal technique," Sarah said on that first day, "I want to tell you something about the music business that no one told me when I was sitting where you're sitting. This industry will test you in ways you can't imagine. It will make you question everything you thought you knew about yourself. Some of you will face rejection, failure, maybe even circumstances that make you want to give up entirely." She paused, looking around the room at these young faces that reminded her so much of her former high school students. "But here's what I've learned. Your voice isn't just the sound that comes out of your throat. Your voice is your story, your perspective, your unique way of seeing the world. And no matter what happens to you, no matter how far you fall or how lost you get, that voice stays with you. It's always there, waiting for you to be ready to use it again." One student, a young woman named Ashley Parker with bright blue hair and nervous energy, raised her hand. "Miss Thompson, how do you bounce back when everything falls apart? Like, what if you lose everything?" Sarah smiled, recognizing something of herself in Ashley's question. "You take it one day at a time. You remember that losing everything external doesn't mean losing everything that matters. And you surround yourself with people who see your worth even when you can't see it yourself." The semester flew by. Sarah found immense satisfaction in working with her students, helping them develop not just their vocal abilities, but their confidence, their artistry, their understanding of what it meant to be a musician in a challenging industry. Many of them had heard her story through the media coverage of her collaboration with Dolly, and they looked at her with a mixture of admiration and hope. If she could come back from homelessness to success, what might be possible for them? But the most rewarding moment came near the end of the semester when Ashley Parker approached her after class. "Miss Thompson, I wanted to thank you, not just for the vocal coaching, but for being honest about your journey. My family, we lost our house last year when my dad got sick. I've been sleeping in my car some nights, trying to hide it from everyone. I was thinking about dropping out, going home, giving up on music. But watching you, seeing what's possible, I think I can keep going." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "Ashley, you absolutely can keep going, and you don't have to do it alone. Come see me after class tomorrow. I know some people who can help with housing, and there are resources available for students in your situation." That night, Sarah called Dolly to tell her about Ashley. "That's beautiful, honey," Dolly said. "You know what this means. You're not just using your voice to sing anymore. You're using it to change lives. That girl is going to remember this moment forever." "It feels like everything is coming full circle," Sarah reflected. "Teaching again, helping students find their voices. It's like I'm becoming who I was always meant to be." "Maybe so, but you're not the same person you were before everything happened. You're better now, stronger, wiser, more compassionate. Your students are getting the best version of you." The spring semester brought new opportunities. Sarah released her first solo EP, a 5-song collection called Finding Home that showcased her songwriting and her distinctive voice. The title track, a deeply personal song about her journey from the streets back to music, received airplay across the country and cemented her reputation as more than just the woman who sang with Dolly Parton. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. The Nashville Scene nominated her for their annual Nashville Hero Award, recognizing individuals who had made significant contributions to the city's community. Sarah Thompson has used her platform to raise over $200,000 for homeless services in Nashville, the nomination read. More importantly, she has changed the conversation about homelessness, helping people understand that anyone can find themselves in desperate circumstances, and anyone can rise from them with the right support. The award ceremony was held at the historic War Memorial Auditorium, and Sarah was stunned to see how many people had come to support her. Margaret Chen from the boarding house was there, along with several of Sarah's fellow residents. Her former students from Belmont filled an entire row. Tommy Richardson, Jake Sullivan, and Emma Rodriguez, her collaborators from that first recording session, sat with broad smiles. And in the front row, beaming with pride, sat Dolly Parton. When Sarah's name was called as the winner, the applause was thunderous. She made her way to the podium, overwhelmed by the support and love filling the auditorium. 6 months ago, she began, her voice strong and clear, I was sleeping in alleys and begging for change. I thought my life was over, that I had nothing left to contribute to the world. Tonight, I'm standing here as a teacher, a recording artist, and hopefully an advocate for people who are where I was. She paused, looking out at the faces in the audience, people who had become her community, her chosen family, her support system. This award isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who refused to see me as a hopeless case. It belongs to Dolly Parton, who heard something in my voice worth nurturing. It belongs to Margaret Chen, who gave me a safe place to rebuild my life. It belongs to my students, who remind me every day why music matters. And it belongs to everyone in Nashville who believes that people deserve second chances. As Sarah returned to her seat, she felt a profound sense of completion. Not the completion of her journey. She knew there was still so much ahead of her, but the completion of a transformation. She was no longer the broken woman who had lost everything. She was no longer the struggling dreamer trying to make it in Nashville. She was Sarah Michelle Thompson, teacher, artist, advocate, survivor. After the ceremony, as she mingled with well-wishers and posed for photos, Sarah found herself in a quiet corner with Dolly. I'm proud of you, honey, Dolly said, pulling her into a warm hug. Not just for what you've accomplished, but for who you've become. You've turned your pain into purpose, your struggle into strength. That's what real heroes do. I couldn't have done any of this without you, Sarah replied. You saw something in me when I couldn't see it myself. I saw what was already there. All I did was give you a platform to show it to the world. The rest, all the hard work, all the courage, all the heart you've put into helping others, that's all you, sweetheart. As the evening wound down and Sarah prepared to leave, she stepped outside into the Nashville night. The city looked different to her now than it had 9 months earlier when she'd been sleeping in its alleys and doorways. Then Nashville had felt cold and unwelcoming, a place where dreams went to die. Now she saw it as it truly was, a city of dreamers and believers, a place where stories like hers were not just possible, but celebrated. She was part of Nashville now, woven into its fabric, contributing to its legacy of lifting people up through the power of music. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Ashley Parker. Watch the award ceremony online. You're amazing, Ms. Thompson. Thank you for showing me what's possible. See you in class Monday. Sarah smiled, pocketed her phone and walked toward her car. Tomorrow was a new day, with new students to teach, new songs to write, new lives to touch. She had found her way home, not to a place, but to a purpose. and she was ready for whatever came next. 1 year after that life-changing encounter in the alley behind the Ryman, Sarah stood backstage at the Grand Ole Opry once again. But this time, she wasn't there as Dolly's guest. She was there as a solo artist, headlining her own segment of the show. The venue that had once seemed impossibly out of reach was now a place where she felt at home. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed across the auditorium, "please welcome back to the Opry stage, Sarah Michelle Thompson." The applause was warm and welcoming as Sarah walked into the spotlights, carrying the same battered acoustic guitar that had been her companion through her darkest days. She paused at the microphone, looking out at the packed auditorium, still sometimes unable to believe this was her life now. "Thank you, Nashville," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the venue. "It's good to be home." She began with "Finding Home," the title track from her EP, her voice filling the auditorium with the raw honesty that had become her trademark. But tonight felt different, special in a way she couldn't quite articulate. As she sang, she noticed familiar faces in the audience, people who had become part of her extended family over the past year. Margaret Chen sat in the third row, tears of pride streaming down her face. Tommy Richardson was in the sound booth, giving her a thumbs up. Several of her Belmont students had managed to get tickets and were singing along to songs they'd heard her work on in class. But it was the surprise appearance that made the night truly magical. "Y'all," Sarah said as she finished her second song, "I want to bring out someone very special. This woman changed my life in ways I'm still discovering. She's been a friend, a mentor, and the best collaborator a girl could ask for. Please welcome the incomparable Dolly Parton." The audience erupted as Dolly emerged from the wings, sparkling in a custom-designed gown that caught the stage lights like stardust. The two women embraced at center stage, and Sarah felt the same warmth and encouragement she'd felt that first night at Martha's kitchen. "Now, Sarah," Dolly said into her microphone, "I understand you have something special planned for tonight." "I do," Sarah nodded, her excitement evident. "Dolly, you know how much Where the River Bends has meant to both of us. But tonight, I want to debut something new, a song I wrote about the night we met, about second chances, and about the power of believing in each other." Sarah strummed the opening chords of a song the audience had never heard before. It was called Alley Angel, and it told the story of their first meeting from Sarah's perspective, the desperation of that rainy night, the miracle of Dolly's appearance, and the journey that had followed. "I was singing to the shadows, just me and the rain, when an angel in rhinestones called out my name." Dolly listened with tears in her eyes as Sarah sang about their friendship, about the doors that had opened, about the life that had been rebuilt from the foundation of that single moment of human kindness. When Sarah reached the bridge, Dolly joined in with a harmony that seemed to come from their souls rather than their voices. Sometimes salvation comes in unexpected forms, dressed in sequins and kindness, weathering life's storms. The song built to a powerful conclusion that had both women and most of the audience in tears. When the last note faded, the standing ovation seemed to go on forever. Sarah and Dolly stood together, hands clasped, as the Opry audience showed their appreciation for not just the performance, but the story behind it. "Nashville," Dolly said when the applause finally quieted, "I want to tell y'all something. A year ago, I thought I was just being kind to a stranger. I had no idea I was about to meet one of the most talented, most determined, most inspiring people I've ever known. Sarah Thompson doesn't just sing, she heals. She doesn't just perform, she transforms. And she's just getting started." After the show, Sarah found herself in the same dressing room where she'd prepared for her first Opry appearance. But now, instead of feeling like an imposter, she felt like she belonged. The room was filled with flowers and congratulatory cards from fellow artists, industry professionals, and fans. There was a knock at her door, and Ashley Parker peeked in, her blue hair now streaked with silver. "Miss Thompson, sorry to bother you, but I wanted to thank you in person." "Ashley, you made it to the show." Wouldn't have missed it for the world. But I wanted to tell you something. Remember last semester when I was sleeping in my car? Well, the resources you connected me with, the support you gave me, I got into stable housing. I finished the semester with a 4.0 and Ashley's voice caught with emotion. I got a recording contract, a small label, but it's real. I start recording my debut album next month. Sarah felt her heart swell with pride. Ashley, that's incredible. I knew you had it in you. I wouldn't have had the courage to keep going without you. You showed me that setbacks don't have to be endings. They can be beginnings if you're brave enough to see them that way. After Ashley left, Sarah sat alone in her dressing room, processing the magnitude of how much her life had changed. Her phone buzzed with congratulatory messages from friends and colleagues across the country. Record labels were calling with increasingly attractive offers. Venues were requesting her for headlining tours. But perhaps the most meaningful message came from an unexpected source. A text from Marcus Williams, her former student who was now in his final year of medical school. Saw the Opry performance online, Mrs. T. You always told us that music could change lives. I never knew how right you were until I saw what you've done with yours. Thank you for teaching me that giving up is never the answer. Can't wait to see where you go next. Sarah smiled, remembering the shy teenager who had been afraid to sing in front of his classmates. Now he was about to become a doctor, and she was rebuilding her life as a professional musician. Both of them had learned that paths aren't always straight, but they can still lead to beautiful destinations. There was another knock at her door, and Dolly appeared with 2 cups of coffee and her famous grin. Mind if I come in? I thought we could have our own little after-party. They sat together on the small couch, sipping coffee and talking about the evening, about how far they'd both come, about the future that stretched ahead of them. Sarah, I want to talk to you about something, Dolly said. I've been thinking about this for months, and tonight convinced me it's time. I want to start a foundation, something that helps musicians who are struggling, who've hit rock bottom, who need a second chance. Would you be interested in running it with me? Sarah nearly choked on her coffee. Are you serious? Dead serious. We'd call it the Second Chance Foundation. We'd provide emergency assistance, connect people with resources, maybe even have a program that pairs established artists with struggling ones, the way I paired with you. What do you think? Sarah thought about all the people she'd met during her time on the streets, talented individuals whose only crime had been falling through the cracks of a system that didn't have room for failure. She thought about Ashley and students like her, brilliant and capable, but one crisis away from losing everything. Yes, she said without hesitation. Absolutely yes. When do we start? How about tomorrow? I've already talked to my business manager about setting up the legal framework. We could announce it next month, maybe do a benefit concert to kick it off. Are you ready to change some more lives, partner? Sarah laughed, feeling the same excitement she'd felt that first day in the recording studio. I can't think of anything I'd rather do. Then, as they talked, late into the night, planning their foundation and dreaming about the lives they might touch, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. 18 months ago, she'd been convinced her story was over, that she had nothing left to offer the world. Now she was not just surviving, but thriving, not just performing, but inspiring, not just singing, but healing. The next morning, Sarah woke up in her own apartment, a beautiful one-bedroom place she'd been able to afford thanks to her teaching salary and her growing music career. She made coffee and sat on her small balcony, looking out over the Nashville skyline as the city woke up around her. Her phone rang, and she saw Dolly's name on the caller ID. Morning, sunshine. You ready for your first day as a foundation co-founder? More ready than I've ever been for anything, Sarah replied. Good, because I've got news. I just got off the phone with the mayor's office. They want to give us the key to the city for our community service work. Seems our little foundation is already making waves before we've even officially launched it. Sarah laughed, shaking her head in amazement. This is all still surreal to me sometimes. Honey, let me tell you something. This isn't surreal. This is what happens when you stop believing in limitations and start believing in possibilities. A year ago, you thought your story was ending. Now look at you. You're just getting started. As Sarah hung up the phone and prepared to start her day, she caught her reflection in the window. The woman looking back at her was confident, purposeful, alive in ways that went far beyond mere survival. She was someone who had learned that rock bottom could be a foundation rather than a grave, that losing everything could teach you what really mattered, that sometimes the most broken people become the best healers. She picked up her guitar, the same one that had been her companion through every stage of this journey, and began to play. The melody that came was new, hopeful, forward-looking. It sounded like a beginning rather than an ending, like a song that could change someone's life the way hers had been changed. Outside her window, Nashville hummed with activity. Somewhere in the city, there were other dreamers struggling to hold on, other voices waiting to be heard, other stories waiting to unfold, and Sarah Michelle Thompson, formerly homeless, now teacher, artist and advocate, was ready to help them find their way home. Her story had come full circle, but the circle was actually a spiral, lifting her higher with each revolution, carrying her toward a future she could never have imagined during those dark nights in the alleys. She had found her voice again, and now she was ready to help others find theirs. The music played on, carrying hope through the streets of Nashville, where dreams don't die. They just wait for their moment to rise again.